Go ahead.
Okay. I want to introduce my good friend Janet England, who is head of the settlement office. She has done many settlements since 1966, you said. And I think some of you have used her for settlements.
More than once, yes.
So she's going to talk on title and title work. Okay, Janet England.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to see you all, many friendly, familiar faces. What I thought was important for you all to consider. You bought your homes maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You might have refinanced. You did what you were told to do. But the liens that were put on by the lenders for the deeds of trust perhaps have not been released. Perhaps you think your deed was recorded. It might not have been recorded. There are so many possible title problems. So when you get ready to sell quickly or convey your property quickly when the market changes for millions of dollars, you want to know that the title is clear. You come up with an unreleased lien from 15 years ago from Wachovia, good luck. Many equity lenders have not released their liens because they want you to continue to use the equity loan, even though it was supposed to be paid and released at record. So those are problems. Our latest sale, he said, well, no, I paid that off 3 years ago. I said, yes, but they still have a lien on your property, so you can't go to settle. Fortunately, he had connections, and they got a release done in a timely manner. So what you own, how you hold title is very important. Most husbands and wives probably took title, tenants by the entirety with survivorship. That meant one dies, the other is automatically the owner of the property. You might have the property in a trust, but did you know that a deed had to be recorded to the trustees of the trust to put your property in the trust? Our good friends, and fortunately I did refinance for them, and they said, oh, my expert told me. My expert was my son, the attorney. He told me that when we die, our property just rolls into the trust. I said, I don't think so. You might want to go back and check with someone. I think you have to record a deed to the trustee to put it in the trust. So they said, oh, no. Well, a few months later, they asked me to notarize deeds for them, putting the property into the trust. So these are things you assume the people you have worked with have done their job. Back in the day, you remember when they would mail you loan documents to sign and you mail them back? Many of you might have had refinances for that. Well, you don't know who paid off the other lender. You don't know if they released it, and many times they did not release the lien from your title. So, I want you to find your deed. Go look for it. I assume everybody's Fairfax County. If you can't find your deed, I have forms here that it's called Title Tune-Up. So you can just fax me a request. I can go to the county. I can get your deed, send you the recorded deed, so you know what is of record and what is not, and who holds title to the property, because there could be, there you go. You're Maryland, I'm sorry, I don't do Maryland. Because it could be, you did put it in a trust, and they didn't record, the attorney who did the trust didn't have a deed prepared and recorded conveying the property to the trustees of the trust. Those are important items to consider. So review your title, take a look at it. If you can't find your deed, or if you looked at your deed, make sure it says tenants by the entirety for husbands and wives. Make sure those words, tenants by the entirety, are in the deed, so that covers that. As far as the unreleased liens for deeds of trust, that can present a problem. So we can do a bring down from the time you acquired the property to date. So if you had any refinances you put on a trust, it was supposed to be released. Or some are released and recorded in the wrong jurisdiction, so it's invalid. Some have errors in them, and they have the wrong information, so they're no good. They have to be corrected. I can't just correct it and put the right information. I would like to, but we have to go back to the lender to get them to correct it. So it could be unreleased. It could be released in the wrong jurisdiction. It can also then have the wrong references. All that has happened. So when you have clerks in all of the industries doing various things, no telling what might happen. So I just want you to be aware, go find your deed, make sure everything's in order. When you get ready to list your property, the realtor's gonna ask you who owns the property and give us a copy of your deed. So that they know who needs to sign the contract. I've had 2 closings where we had a contract signed by the husband and wife to sell the property, and we do the title search, and guess what? They put their daughter on the title to the property, and they said, it's okay, she was just on for estate planning purposes. Well, that's one thing, but I'm sorry, she has to sign to sell and convey that property. That happened 2 times. So these are the kinds of things that we see, and that's why it's important to take care of it now, so you don't have, that's one less thing that you have to worry about. Any questions? Well, good, I covered it all. They're in your folder, there is a form, so if you want us to check it for you, you can send over a copy of the deed or give me the information. We can pull the deed for you, so you do not have to physically have that original document to prove your ownership. I think a car title you do, but for real estate you do not, as long as it's recorded in the land records. So we can just go to the land records, find your deed, pull a copy. If it's got recording information on it, then it's there and it's good. Alrighty, yes?
I have a question.
Uh-huh,
My property is in a trust.
okay,
And I know the attorney was having it recorded,
okay.
but do they record the whole trust?
No, they record a deed, and usually it has what's called trust powers that says no one needs to look at your original trust.
Okay.
That it has all the provisions necessary for the trustee for the substitution. So no, and that way if you go to refinance or you go to sell, you don't have to present your private trust information to anyone.
Since my trust was established, my husband has passed away, so.
Well, that's something for our McCandlish Lillard attorney to talk to you about, because there are, depending on the trust, there's successor trustees, et cetera, and she can cover that for you.
And make sure that the attorney, it's in Loudoun County versus
Right.
the attorneys in Fairfax County. I'm just assuming it's recorded.
Did they, right, exactly, did they record it in the right jurisdiction? What a good question.
Yeah.
Did they mail you your recorded deed?
It's been years ago.
Okay, all right, well, we can also check Loudoun County for you, if you like.
Yeah. that's-
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know, because we all think, oh, well, yeah, I thought we owned it. Well,
Right.
oh, I forgot about that.
Okay.
Okay, very good. It's nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
So did everybody that needs one get one?
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
And I just wanted to note, I do Maryland. I have access to land rec, so if you know anybody or have properties in Maryland, I can do titles, I can do a deed search for you. So just let me know. It's actually just called land rec, so if you Google that, or if not, this is too confusing, I can help you out with that as well, so. And then I had 2 examples where I was the buyer agent on one of the properties where the daughter was on the title of the property. They had no idea. We wrote the contract, they had no idea, it popped up, so luckily I had Janet with that one and she caught it right away. So, and then also another example is we had a condo sale recently. They put a trust together right before he passed. They thought everything went into the trust. Turns out half the estate wasn't in the trust. Property went into the trust. Then the deed didn't get recorded. They thought it got recorded. And then they had to do a deed of correction because the parking space was incorrect, and then the deed of correction was done after the seller passed away. It became a huge nightmare to have to deal with. So I'm just saying, get that paperwork lined up. Don't ever assume it's recorded. Check back in with your lawyer, make sure, but I'll let Sarah speak to that more. Thank you.
All right, next up is Sarah Aviles, and she is a principal attorney with McCandlish Lillard in Fairfax. We're really happy that you could come and join us today, Sarah. She's been practicing law in the area of trust, wills, and estates since 2013, and I guess you're concentrating on the practice of planning, real estate, estate planning, trust, and estate administration fiduciary representations. So I'm really pleased to have her, and Sarah will let you go ahead and talk, and maybe you can address that issue about the funding the trust as well.
Oh, of course. All right, so good morning, everyone. So I'm, as I got introduced, I'm with McCandlish Lillard, and I'm going to talk about the 3 pillars. I tried to give it a catchy name. Frankly, I probably should call it the 3 trees, because from those pillars we've got a million different branches. So if we could go to our second slide, and if not, I'll just chat. So so one of the things that I'd love to address right off is to follow up on our wonderful speech right before is recording the deed. So that is something that we do when we do estate planning. However, a lot of the times it really depends on your lawyer. So one of the big things I always tell people is when you're doing estate planning, I even have really good friends who call me and say, can I use LegalZoom? And I say, do you know what I do for a living? and I say at the same time, I say, well, if you use LegalZoom, I'll still see your beneficiaries later on, and then I'll get more work because something will be wrong. Not 9 times out of 10. When you do your estate planning, I always tell people, remember, what you are doing is you are planning for the shift of several hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions of dollars, maybe even just a couple hundred, or a house that's, frankly, in Northern Virginia, worth several hundred thousands of dollars. So when you're doing legal planning, you are not just planning for security for your beneficiaries, but also for the shifting of a lot of money and a lot of assets. And a lot of times people don't realize the social and emotional cost that goes along with that. If any of you have ever dealt with the death of a parent or a relative or a friend, and you've handled the estate or the trust, if they had a trust, you know how much work can go into that even the most organized person, it's still walking into the house and looking at all the things they've accumulated over the years and saying, oh my gosh, I have to get rid of all this, or finding out that they have 17 different accounts in 17 different banks. They have retirement accounts that don't have beneficiaries. They have life insurance coming in from here or there. They have a house that's underwater. They have debts when they haven't filed their taxes for 5 years. I just got that estate in. So estate planning basically comes down to 3 key points. And a lot of you, it sounds like, for example, it sounds like we have a trust already, so you've probably all maybe worked with a lawyer before, or at least looked at estate planning documents. And one of the things that they probably would have talked to you about, particularly if they're estate planning focused, is at the very least the first 2, incapacity planning and estate planning for post-death. Most of the time when people come into my office, the first thing they think of is a will. And that's because that's in all the books, all the movies, Knives Out, there's a fight over the will, whatever the popular culture is, it's always, oh, who's in the will, who got cut out of the will. That's just the pinnacle or the tip of the iceberg. Estate planning for post-death is very important. That's why it's one of my 3 pillars. Make sure that everything runs really smoothly for your spouse, your kids, your friends, if you're leaving things to charities, for those charities, for whoever you want to benefit when you pass away. However, more important, I would argue, is incapacity planning. because that's the protection of you all. That makes sure that, you know, as I always tell people, dark motto of our office, death comes to us all. It's unfortunately unavoidable. Old age hopefully comes to us all, and most likely with old age comes some form of incapacity. For example, I have a 93-year-old client right now, absolutely wonderful. Can carry, you know, emails me all the time. On top of it, read through my entire trust, which I'm going to say probably half my clients don't do, or tell me they do and didn't. But he read through everything, understands clear as a bell. But his wife has severe dementia. So we've got two different routes. And the thing is 93 years old, he knows very clearly that he could take a turn and go down the same route as his wife. Or frankly, he could just get to the point where physically he's not able to get around as much. And so both of those come into incapacity planning. It's not just mental decline that might happen and cause you to be unable to pay your bills, file your taxes, keep paying your mortgage, make sure the cable company gets paid, make sure your mail comes in. All of those things are incapacity planning. And so that's one of the more important things that we typically do as a group. We do powers of attorney for incapacity planning, and most of you have probably heard of that term, advanced medical directives. And then for estate planning, we do either wills or something called revocable living trusts. So every now and then, we'll also look at your specific circumstances and say, well, in your case, you might also need an irrevocable trust, a type of trust that does different things. Estate tax planning. That's the tax that's on all your property when you pass away. Right now, you have to have $13.61 million for that to be a problem. I hope that is your terrible problem, that you have $13.61 million, but most of the people who come in the door do not. But Northern Virginia is a wealthy area. The houses have gone up so high in value that we do have a lot of people where, at the very least, we check for estate tax issues and see, do we have to do further planning? Do we have to do irrevocable trusts? These building blocks that help protect children with special needs, grandchildren with special needs. A lot of times we have parents and grandparents come in. I ask them, because this is one of the things our firm in particular specializes in, do you have any beneficiaries who are disabled, have disabilities, and are reliant on government benefits? In that case, we're going to do completely different planning. And so it's one of those things that people don't know about, particularly if you're the grandparent or the aunt or uncle. The parents might know, although I get a lot of parents who come in and they don't realize that their child who has severe autism or Down syndrome should have a very specialized type of planning. Where we get to long-term care planning, that's one of the ones that I am starting to get a lot more people who call right away, and that's one of the questions they have. And you're probably going to more think about Medicaid planning. So you might have heard of long-term care, but if you're ever chatting in a group, one of the key words that I get is Medicaid planning. Oh, we're really worried, we need to talk to the lawyer about Medicaid planning. How do we get prepared for long-term care? How do we make sure that the government doesn't steal all our money? It's one of the biggest questions I get all the time. Medicaid's going to steal my money, and I'm going to be without anything. How do I prevent that? So first things first, I'll tell you the government does not steal your money. Taxes make it seem like it, but they don't. Medicaid planning is that third pillar, and it's one of the ones that a lot of people don't get to until it's too late. I do a lot of emergency long-term care planning because we have a daughter who comes in, says, my mom has late-stage Parkinson's, we were delaying doing anything because we really didn't know what to do, and she doesn't have a power of attorney, she doesn't have a medical power of attorney, she doesn't have a will, she doesn't have a trust, and also she's going to run out of money and we need to put her in a long-term care facility. And at that point I say, okay, I always try not to say, it would have been nice to see you 5 years ago. But basically that's kind of the gist of it, is when you're doing long-term care planning, you have to do that really far in advance to get the best value out of it, to get all the benefits. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain what Medicare planning actually is?
Of course. And actually, would you mind going to my next slide? Sorry, Cynthia, make you go up and down. So, and I'll give you the caveat of I've got like 15 minutes, and this I've done on an hour and a half presentation, so I'll give you the snapshot version. So here, just FYI, these are the things, when I said it's like a tree with branches, these are the branches. So as you can see, for example, estate planning, we've got last wills, revocable living trusts, trusts for children, special needs trusts for individuals with disabilities, worries about the estate tax, businesses. Make sure if you have a business, you have a succession plan that is legal and written up. Irrevocable trust, durable general power of attorney, advanced medical directive, living will, and then we have what we also do, which are our emergency planning tends to be guardianship, conservatorship, and then we get to Medicaid planning. So your question there, I get a lot of folks who call me and say, I'm really worried, the government's gonna take all my money, and I'm not gonna be able to get long-term care. Medicaid planning, what it is, so Medicaid, when the government entered or set up that system, what they were trying to do is they were trying to make sure that elderly people who needed long-term care weren't on the streets just because they didn't have enough money to pay for long-term care. They, as a public policy, did not want grandma sitting on the corner of the street with severe dementia, unable to be properly cared for, properly taken care of, because she didn't have enough money. And frankly, if anyone's ever looked at the cost of long-term care nowadays, not many people have that kind of money. I think some of the cheaper ones I see are $8,000 a month, $10,000, $12,000. There's the ones where you buy in, and it's a step-up program, and Green Springs, Ashby Ponds, you're putting down $360,000, like buying a house, essentially. So Medicaid planning is basically, if we do it, I can do emergency Medicaid planning, which is not gonna save you as much money, and you're gonna be in a place you probably don't wanna be in, or I can do long-term Medicaid planning. And I'll tell you the first step and the first goal of long-term Medicaid planning is to never need Medicaid at all. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but Medicaid, again, think of it, it's designed by the government to provide care for people who need it. So to qualify, you have to have $2,000 or less in non-exempt assets, or they call it non-countable assets. So certain things are exempt, like your house, if you live in it, one car, certain prepaid burial plots. There's a whole list, special needs trusts designed a certain way, Medicaid asset protection trust, that's one of the irrevocable trusts I was talking about that we do. Various different ways to shield assets so that you can get to that $2,000 limit, but still have money to pay for things Medicaid doesn't pay for, a new toothbrush, a new set of pajamas, a trip to see your daughter get married, things, because Medicaid's gonna pay for your basic needs. You're gonna be in a room, probably a shared room, taken care of, fed, medicine, everything like that, but it's not gonna pay for beyond that. So a lot of times when we're trying to do pre-planning, and this is particularly important if you have a spouse who is not doing as well as you. For example, one spouse, you'll hear them called community spouse, is doing really well, living in the home, but husband or wife has severe Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, what have you, and needs to go into long-term care. And Medicaid's gonna look at both spouses' income. So you could either drain all your money, which is frankly what the government wants you to do. They want you to pay for care until you get down to that $2,000 limit, or you can plan so that you can get to that $2,000 limit and still have money. I don't like to say squirreled away because it makes it sound like it's illegal. It's not, but there's money reserved to take care of you in a way that goes a little bit above and beyond the basic bare minimum Medicaid care. So, and one of the things I always like to point out is I've got them up here, Medicare, which most of you probably have health insurance with, and Medicaid. Medicaid is the one that's the long-term care. So I get people in all the time as well who think they need Medicaid planning, but they're doing great, like you folks, they're up and about, they're wandering around, they seem fine mentally, their health is great, and a lot of times I'll say, well, I don't know if you need Medicaid planning right now. Also, let's say you have $5 million, you have done your own long-term care planning by making sure that your assets are such that you can decide how you want to age. You can decide to age in place. And so some of that is financial planning. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of it's luck. if you're really healthy all of your life, even into old age, you're gonna be less likely to run out of money as quickly as someone who is not as healthy. And that's frankly the luck of genetics, the luck of what happens in your life. So I always tell people the time for long-term care planning is usually when you talk to me about estate planning. It's get in there, talk to a lawyer who knows elder law, who knows how to do both estate planning and long-term care planning to give you an opinion on, do you even need this? Because I'll also tell you there are lawyers who will sell you $20,000 plans for how to do Medicaid planning, and a lot of times anyone who comes in the door. Again, it sounds a little bit tooting my own horn. I don't mean to do that. I just mean to say one of the things that we do is we tell you whether or not we think you actually need it. Because if you don't need it, we don't want to do Medicaid planning for you. It's onerous. It's something that's going to be you're losing certain rights to things. Anytime you're trying to go around the government, it's going to cost you some rights or some control or different things like that. Same thing with the estate tax. So there's always ways to plan. The big thing to do is to get in and figure out, do you need to plan? When do you need to plan? And what do you need to do? So long-term care planning, like I said, I could do a whole seminar on that. I could do a whole day. I've gone to seminars that are whole days. I could also do it on estate planning. For example, you guys all mentioned trusts, and I don't want to forget that while I'm here. The big thing about trust is to make sure, trust or wills, is to make sure that you have a plan that fits your assets. One of the things that you were mentioning is that you've seen deeds that have the child on the deed. That is one of the most common things I get with folks is when they're starting to get a little bit older and they're thinking, you know what, it's a little bit harder for me to deal with this. I want to be proactive. I want to put my kids on all my accounts so that if I, can't do something, they're on the account, they can manage it. My first thing that I tell people if I see that is get your kid off that account, get your kid off that house. And the reason for that is if you put your child on a joint bank account, they own 1/2 if it's you and them, or 1/3 if it's you, them, and a spouse of that account. Meaning, let's say they turn nefarious. And of course, no one I see ever says their child's gonna turn nefarious. But the child turns nefarious, pulls all the money out, they had a right, it's their money, they have a right to pull money out of that account. 2, let's say your child's not nefarious. Every person who comes in, wonderful children. I see them when they pass away, sometimes they're wonderful, sometimes they're not. So it really depends. But let's say they're wonderful, they do want to just take care of you. But let's say they get in, God forbid, car accident, divorce, and creditors start coming. They own 1/3 or 1/2 of that account, or 1/3 or 1/2 of that house. The creditors, we've actually had creditors come in, take that money, that's actually mom and dad's money, because it's theirs legally. We've gone to court to argue. I had this case 5 years ago. Daughter was on the account because it was convenient for mom, which I'll be honest, it is. It is very convenient. But when creditor came in and took that money, mom had to spend a lot of money to try and fight with the court, and the court in the end just said, nope, she was on it. You didn't prove that it was just convenience. Yes?
I've got a question.
Yes.
I put my daughter on one of my checking accounts
Mm-hmm.
because I broke my leg and shoulder and I was in the hospital and I wanted her to have access to be able to pay the bills when I was at the commission.
Very much, yeah.
So when I go to the bank, it's a very small bank, I said I want to have her name taken off. He said I can't do it.
Yeah, because now she owns part of it, so she has to agree to be taken off the account. So, and by the way, I'm not saying that if you've done that, because half the people who come to my office, they have already done that.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what I'm saying is get your kid, if your kid's as lovely as you say, get your kid, go down, take them off. But I understand why you did it, and that's why people do it, because it's convenient, it's easy, and it helps.
I was at the commission for a year, so
Very much so.
she needed to be able to.
Well, and one of the things I tell people is you can still make sure that someone can access your money, like your daughter. You can do that with a trust. You can do that with a durable general power of attorney. You can do that by going down to the bank and having them basically as a power of attorney, set your child up as a signatory or an agent. Sometimes they use different words, but it means they're not an owner, but they can access and use the money. And that means they're safe from the creditors, liability, but same convenience that you're after right there. But that's also one of the reasons we do look at trust for incapacity planning as well.
So basically you have to get her to sign something to take her name off
Yeah.
of that one account.
And the only downside I'll say is most of the time, the bank is going to say, oh, we have to move it to a new account. They used to, I feel like when I
And
started,
got all my,
auto
bank
payments,
deposits
I
in
know.
So I don't wanna
I
mess up that
know.
account.
Well, and so one of the things I tell people is to look, if you keep that a low balance, you know, let's say your daughter, God forbid, does get sued or divorced, at least it's a very low balance account. But it's still, that's why I don't like it, because there are a lot of pros. I'll be honest, there's a lot of pros, but there's also a lot of cons, and the cons are really bad. So for example, when people pass away, I get a lot of folks who, daughter was on the account and there's 5 more kids. And daughter says, very justly, because this is actually the law, it's now my account, you guys get nothing. And that is not what mom meant. So sometimes I do get daughter who says, oh, I know I was on here, but it's really everyone, so I'm gonna share it with my siblings. And what I have to tell that daughter, very well-meaning daughter, is you very well can. FYI, you're gonna have to file a gift tax return because you are now making gifts to your siblings, because it is legally your money. So if you wanna give it to your siblings, that's great. You're gonna have to talk to your accountant about whether the gift tax is gonna hit you. And then, or I have the, again, sometimes justified sibling who says, no, it's my money, I'm keeping it, you all get nothing. So it's a back and forth, and it's why I don't like it. And with the houses, I don't like it because a lot of people, again, think it's convenient for estate planning. But when you pass away, if your property drops or passes to your kids, they're gonna get a step up in tax basis. Meaning, let's say you bought your properties 40, 30 years ago. Like my parents bought their house in 1993. They're in Fairfax as well. That house, I think they bought for $300,000. I can't even estimate. I think it's at $1 million right now. They tried to sell it. The capital gain would be insane. But, and not that I'm hoping this for them, but if they were to pass away, hopefully many, many years in the future, then, and it passed to us, or they decide they like my nephew better, which it sounds like, then it'll get a step up in tax basis. And the tax basis won't be that $300,000. It'll be the 1 point whatever it was worth on their date of death. But if you put your child on that deed, you're gonna lose that because they're, well, I'll caveat that. You're gonna lose that as to the other portion that you own, because your child owns 1/2 or 1/3. They won't get a step up on that 1/2 or 1/3. So they're not gonna get as good of a tax break. And I know I've probably gone way over my time.
No,
so,
this is good. This is all very good.
but kind of the short term is very important to do. I did want to throw in, if anyone's done their estate planning documents and you all seem very responsible, you've gotten up, you've come to this seminar, you're probably at least thinking ahead, and it sounds like I know someone already has a trust. Have you looked at it in the past 5 years? In 2020, we had a big update to the law in terms of retirement accounts. In 2012, we had an absolute massive overchange of the Virginia code itself. All the legal codes changed. And some of these are fixable. I had someone pass away with a 2001 will. It works. It's just how easy it is. And that's kind of what I tend to say is if your goal is to make things as easy as possible, you're always good to do a check-in. I tell people every 3 years or so, 5 years, is something reasonable to make sure you have who you want named. Sometimes people forget they named their sister as the advanced medical directive, and sister has moved to China and it's not really feasible anymore. Or they still have guardians named for their kids and their kids are 62. So, yes, sir.
One question and
Yeah.
3 elements. Medicaid exemptions,
Sure.
401, military pension, and if you go into a continuum care community, there's the money that you put into the continuum care community within is that. So 401, is a 401
No.
exempt?
And that's one of the big things is one of the problems with Medicaid planning, emergency Medicaid planning, is I have to liquidate sometimes people's 401ks and IRAs. And if you know anything about that, that's not a great thing. And we only do it because we absolutely have no other option.
Okay.
So, no.
Military pension?
Military pension is going to be income. So income, there is an income limit for Medicaid. I'll be honest, I don't know it off the top of my head, and the reason I don't is because as long as you're making less than care costs, which most people are, you'll qualify for a different type, an exception, version of Medicaid. So that's income, so it does, but it's not gonna, it's just gonna determine how much you have to pay along with Medicaid. If you make enough income, they make you pay some of that income, and then they also pay the difference.
Okay. And then the third one was the.
What you've paid in continuing care, yes, that will also make a difference as well. But frankly, the reason that you have done that, so let's say you put money down for Ashby Ponds or Green Spring. Their contracts, and I say those just because I see their contracts all the time, I think there are others, but their contracts say what their goal is one, to get people who, because they're a business, they don't think will go on Medicaid. So they look at your finances, they have a really high buy-in, and if you start being able to pay for it, let's say you just go into memory care a lot sooner than they
Yeah,
thought,
they
start pulling that money. And when you get down to zero, then the nice thing about those buy-in places, I'm not selling this, by the way, there's pros and cons, but the nice thing is they have to keep you there. They can't kick you out, but they will start, helping, or pushing your beneficiaries or your agents to do Medicaid planning for you so that they continue to get paid. But yeah, you have to go through that.
those are the only three.
Like that.
Sarah,
Yes.
is that, how some of these places like Ashby Ponds, Green Springs, Woodley Chase, et cetera, some of them don't have benevolent, what's called a benevolent fund. Can you kind of address that? I mean, is that so
Sure.
they can keep somebody there if they're already a resident, or?
Well, so benevolent fund sounds a little bit nice for what I think they're actually doing is to make sure they keep getting paid. So most of the time when people pass away and they live at Ashby or Green Spring, we typically see almost all of that down payment come back to the kids because they just, again, they know how to vet people. They didn't go through it, or they went through a very little bit of it. But places, for example, like, let's say Sunrise. Sunrise is a big one. There's Sunrises all over the place. If you go into Sunrise and let's say it's nursing home level and then memory care, they're not, most of them that I know of at least, don't have a down payment that you have to pay. And in that case, you just have to keep paying the annual fee. If they take Medicaid, here's a big one. We have a lot of folks where, again, it's usually the children come to me and say, Mom's in this facility, she's used up all the money, she needs Medicaid now, can I just apply for it? And my big question is, did you ask the facility if they accept Medicaid patients? Because a lot of them, especially in Northern Virginia, do not. There are certain states, I think it's New York, because I think we were dealing with some issues with my grandma, where they all have to have some Medicaid, no, New Jersey, sorry, where they have to have some Medicaid beds, but that's not the case in Virginia. Virginia's not a great state to retire in, but that's a big thing too, is make sure you know where you're going, and that's part of the long-term care planning, is planning out, do I have enough money, how is it allocated, am I going to be able to have the plan that I want, not the one that I'm going to be forced into.
Do you have to be a skilled nursing facility in Virginia to qualify?
To qualify, yes. You have to meet the, you don't have to be a facility, you have to need that level care.
Yeah, because in New Jersey is forward thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into an assisted living center with minimal care and they'll pay for it.
Oh, interesting. New Jersey, I mean, my grandma lived up there, and so I knew the very brief, I always get the, what should we do? So I was like, I don't practice in New Jersey. Generally speaking, find a lawyer who does know what they're doing.
That's from experience.
But yes, that's the thing with Medicaid, is it's state specific.
Yeah.
So whatever state you live in, that's one of the things you want to chat with lawyers about. If part of your long-term care planning is, where do I want to live? Where does it make the most sense that I can save the most money, have the least expensive care, or in some cases, be near my daughter, be near my son, be far away from my daughter-in-law, whatever the case is for you, that's part of long-term care as well. So I think I'll wrap up because I know I've
You're
gone very
fine,
apologies.
please.
Any other questions?
We do have Sarah's information in your packet, so if you do have things come up. that you
I always
wanna
tell people, we
reach
do
out
free
to her.
initial consults, because a lot of times, sometimes people come in and they don't actually need anything, they just need a check-in. Sometimes people come in and they need an overhaul. Whatever we do, we'll tell you what you need, and how to get through there. And I always tell people, if you don't use me as a lawyer, use a lawyer who does estate planning and elder law, not a lawyer who does everything under the sun. Because generally when you do everything under the sun, you're sort of good about everything under the sun, but not great at anything. Estate planning, if that's all you do, there's a bunch of firms in Northern Virginia. Ours is one of them. There are many, many around Loudoun, Fairfax, Arlington, Alexandria that do know what they're doing. So that's my selfless part of the plug of, I know it sounds self-serving to say, see a lawyer, but even if it's not me, see a lawyer. So that's me.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not even that important.
Or you can get my purse out of here.
There. I'm here to introduce Laurie MacNaughton.
Very good.
Yes, there you go. She is a preeminent reverse mortgage specialist with Atlantic Coast Mortgage. Margo and Fran and I had the opportunity to sit down with her months ago, and were quite frankly blown away. They attended a class with Larry Anderson, who couldn't say enough nice things about you, and so we reached out, made contact, talked to her, and quite frankly, we were blown away by the possibilities of reverse mortgages, because we've always had that idea. We see that Tom Selleck commercial in the back of our head, we all know it, and we were really just amazed at what the possibilities are. So, with no further ado here, Laurie, thank you. Take it away.
Could I actually ask you to pass some of these down to
Absolutely.
everyone for, there we go.
Yep.
Information. Yeah, so that funny looking name is indeed MacNaughton. I haven't always been a lender. I actually started off years ago as a high school chemistry teacher. And on the first day of class, I would tell my students, it's like there's a knot in my shoelace. MacNaughton. So I taught for a few years, not really too many. I taught for almost 5 years. And I got to the point where I just got absolutely sick of my students' parents. It was the parents. This was in the early 90s. And when you're going through college, nobody prepares you for the fact that you're going to get bullied by your students' parents. You expect the kids to kind of act up, but nobody prepares you. And they had just invented helicopter parents. And, so I stayed home for a number of years raising my girl babies. I got 4 wonderful, amazing daughters. And then when I did jump back into the workforce, I went to work for a law firm. And I was a technical writer for an international adoption law firm. And at some point I got a call, about 5 years into that job, I got a call from, at the time, Wells Fargo. And they said they were recruiting for a reverse mortgage specialist. I turned them down flat. I wasn't looking for a job. I had billable hours. I didn't need a job. But the guy on the phone said the following. He said the reverse mortgage, FHA reverse mortgage program was designed to keep us in our own homes with independence and dignity. In our own homes with independence and dignity. I had grown up sharing a bedroom. My daddy was an aerospace engineer, so we were West Coast. We did what was called the West Coast two-step. When my grandfather died, my parents moved my grandmother all the way across the country and put her in the only open bedroom in the house, which happened to be my bedroom. So my grandmother, who had come from a very privileged background, was now sleeping in a twin bed in a baby's bedroom. And every single day of my life, I heard a question. What was that question? You know it from your own parents or your own grandparents. What was that question I heard? What was that? Why did it happen to me? When are you taking me home? It's at the core of our heart. hearts, isn't it? We want to be at home, and for most of us, we don't want to just live at home, we want to die at home. The original reverse mortgage thinking was this is a way to keep people in their own home, and it, over the past 40 years, has become much more than that. And we're going to look at how a reverse mortgage works, why it has a bad reputation in some quarters, and then we're also going to look at a second purpose for a reverse mortgage. If you were to go in and talk to a traditional mortgage lender, you'd be talking to that mortgage lender about one of two umbrellas. Either refinancing the home you are already in, refinance mortgage, right? Or you'd be talking about purchasing a new home, a different umbrella. Refinance and purchase, both mortgages, but different umbrellas. With reverse mortgages, there are those exact same two umbrellas. Most of us are more familiar with the refinance, and that's what we're going to look at first. So we're going to say, for the purposes of this discussion, at least initially, we're going to, I call this my pickle jar, because that same grandmother I was referring to, she had a big old pickle jar. It was filled up with pennies, and so I have 4 brothers, and we would practice or attempt to move that big old pickle jar filled with pennies so you could carry it the farthest. But this is going to be a stand-in for the home. How did this pickle jar get filled up with pennies? Not a trick question. How did this pickle jar get filled up with pennies? If this is the house, how did it get filled up with equity? Yeah, paid off the mortgage or bought it in cash many years ago. But as Sarah says, this pickle jar didn't start off this size, right? When you bought this house, it was a little pickle jar. And how did it turn into a big pickle jar? Home appreciation. Yeah, home appreciation. That pickle jar has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And now it's a great big pickle jar, and it's filled up with pennies. But you can't do anything with those pennies in the pickle jar. All a reverse mortgage does is it takes the lid off the top of the pickle jar, and it allows you to reach in and take out some of those pennies as needs arise. Now this should sound very familiar, taking pennies out of the pickle jar, right? Tapping into your equity. What would we call that? You know, a home equity line of credit, right? A reverse mortgage is nothing in the world other than a home equity line of credit. So if it's a home equity line of credit, why not just do a home equity line of credit, right? The discerning mind should ask that immediately, okay? If it's just a line of credit, why not just do a line of credit? Well, yes, say it louder, say it louder.
You gotta pay it back.
You gotta pay it back. So let's say your spouse has a medical emergency and now you have to have $50,000 in quick cash. You tap into your home equity line of credit, you take out $50,000. Everything is much better for 29 days, but on day 30,
First check.
now you've picked up a monthly mortgage payment. And the more you take out of your home equity line of credit, the bigger the month-end repayment obligation gets. The cruelest thing I see in the entire course of my job is somebody who has gone into their local bank, they've done a home equity line of credit, and now they're falling behind because they can't afford that month-end repayment obligation. Pay, you stay, you don't, you won't. If you don't make that month-end obligation, you can slip into foreclosure. With a reverse mortgage line of credit, you access what you need when you need it, but there is never a required monthly repayment obligation. The loan is repaid on the back end in reverse when you no longer need the home. So when you either transfer to a care facility or pass away or decide to sell and move to Portugal, the loan is repaid. The rest of the equity, including all appreciated value of the home, belongs to you or your heirs or to your estate. The loan is repaid, the kids get the rest, is the shorthand I use. So what is the loan balance? Well, we don't really know how long you fixing to live and how much are you fixing to use. We don't know what the loan balance it's gonna be, but the loan balance, the formula is, it's whatever you've borrowed plus the interest on what you've borrowed gets repaid. And remember, a lender is just a money store, right? You go to Wegmans to buy apples, you go to the bank, I'm not a bank, but you go to your lender to buy money. Why does Wegmans sell apples? For the profit margin on the apple. Why does a lender sell money? For the profit margin in lending, it's called interest. So what gets repaid is what's been borrowed plus the interest on what's been borrowed. The kids get the rest. Yes, and tell me your name again.
Maureen.
Maureen. I'm
How
terrible.
much equity do you have to have in order to get?
So, so I'm gonna answer a question you're not asking, and then answer the question you are asking. How do we know how much you're qualifying for? So we're gonna put a belt around the tummy of the pickle jar, but what determines where that belt goes? It's your age and prevailing interest rates. The older you are, the more equity you qualify for. This is called the equity reserve. Never can you pick up this pickle jar and dump out all the pennies. The only way to dump all the pennies out of the pickle jar is to talk to our ladies here and sell your house. You dump out all the pennies and get a big old Wile E. Coyote bag of pennies, right? Now you don't have a house. There again, talk to our ladies here, get a house. But where we put the belt around the pickle jar is a function of your age. The older you are, the lower the belt goes. But the higher rates are, we have to start slipping it back up. So right now, my oldest clients, or my clients, actually not my oldest clients, but my clients who are in their 80s, the belt's gonna go around about the belly button of the pickle jar, maybe a little bit lower. If you're very young, if you're right at 62, the belt's gonna go up around the underarms. And why do they predicate the loan to value on age? That's funky, no other loan does that. The reason is if you're 62, you've got tons of life expectancy in front of you. And during that life expectancy, we should realistically expect the housing market to go up and down. If somebody has to sell within the next, let's say 15 or 18 years from now, and the home's gone down in value, the feds want you to have equity to take with you, even if the pickle jar has shrunk. But if you're in your 90s and you do a reverse mortgage, and we're gonna put the belt around the knees of the pickle jar, it's because at 90, you're getting near the end of the runway, right? I don't care how good your gene pool is. If you're 90, your life expectancy is shorter than it was when you were 62. So they predicate it upon date of birth. So the answer to your question is, how much are you gonna qualify for? I don't know. I stick it in the reverse mortgage calculator. It pings the Department of Vital Statistics and the US Treasury, puts that together and tells us where the belt goes. But in general, for somebody in their 70s, they can expect the belt to go maybe just above the belly button. The rest of that is the equity reserve. So what can you use that equity for? Anything you want to use that equity for, it is your money. It is non-taxable. This is equity and not income. So I'm going to talk a little bit about applications. I've been doing this for many years. I have seen everything under the sun. Oh, you know what, actually I'm going to add one last thing. If you still have a mortgage on your home, you're still going to qualify for the same amount, but you have to qualify for enough so that we can buy the loan from your current lender. So let's say you owe $200,000 on your current mortgage and you qualify for $400,000. We buy the debt from your current lender, and then we're just the lender of record. We hold that, and then whatever's left in the amount you qualified for, that becomes your line of credit. One quick thing about the line of credit. If you were to do a line of credit through Truist, and it had $400,000 in it, and you didn't touch it for 3 years, how much is in that line of credit 3 years on? $400,000, right? No magic there, it just sits there waiting for you to draw it. That is not how a reverse mortgage line of credit works. If you set aside that line of credit in what's called a standby line of credit, and you don't touch it for 3 years, that is actually picking up reverse mortgage line of credit growth in your favor. think of a lump of bread dough sitting on the kitchen counter. What's happening to that lump of bread dough over time? It's rising, it's getting bigger and bigger. You wanna make some like friendship bread, you pinch off a little nibbins of that and you bake that, and what happens to the rest? Keeps on a ticking, That is your reverse mortgage line of credit.
If you access your line of credit,
Does it freeze the growth?
no,
Oh,
no, if you access the line of credit, say for $10,000,
mm-hmm.
can you pay it back?
Okay, did everybody hear this? Can you take it out and put it back into the pickle jar? Can you take it out and put it back? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. And I'm actually gonna tell a story about this real
So
quickly.
you're borrowing interest-free money.
You're borrowing tax-free money, so you're borrowing tax-free money, right? There's interest, if you took it out and didn't put it back, we would be collecting interest in our favor, right? We're giving you money, but if you put it back in, there's nothing to gain interest, there's nothing to pay interest on, right? So any loan has interest.
Okay.
You're gaining growth, I can't call it interest because interest is taxable, but you're gaining reverse mortgage line of credit growth. When you take it out, now that becomes a loan, we've lent you money.
Mhm.
And so when that gets paid back, you're gonna pay out what you paid back what you borrowed, or the house is gonna pay back more properly. The house is gonna pay back what you borrowed, plus the interest on what you borrowed.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not interest-free, but it is tax-free, which is huge.
All right, but the interest that you're paying, if you started paying back,
Yeah, pay it back.
okay.
Now there's no loan, right?
Okay, but the interest, you use that as a deduction of taxes?
Can you use the interest, if you pay it back, can you use the interest as a mortgage interest deduction? It's a mortgage, it has interest, it's a mortgage interest deduction. I'm gonna, absolutely, so the answer is 100% yes. And I'm gonna tell you a quick story about my mother. I'm from this crazy Eastern European, I'll answer your question in just a second. I'm from a crazy Eastern European family, and there's a trust fund. My great-grandfather had a shipping fleet in the Baltic. He set up a trust fund, it conveys to the firstborn through the generations, and my mother was the firstborn, and I am not the firstborn. So mother had a trust fund. Mother also had a reverse mortgage. Why did mother have a reverse mortgage and a trust fund? And here's the reason. The stock market goes up and down, and you don't want to draw on your positions when the stock market is depressed. Right? When it's down, you don't want to sell your shares. So is what her wealth management team did is they would have her instead draw upon her reverse mortgage, tax-free money. Then, oops, pull that penny. Then when the market was up, they would have her sell shares, meet monthly expenses, and take the overage and pump it back into the reverse mortgage. Why? Mortgage interest deduction, and now there's more unused principal balance to gather all that interest, that growth in her favor. Reverse mortgage has very much gone from an extremist, those in extremists, the old, poor, and sick, as I call them, to a wealth management strategy. I do still do a fair few extremist loans, people who are old and poor and sick. Most of my loans come to me through wealth management teams who are doing very much. I was with Middleburg Bank for many years, and the trust department there was my biggest referral provider. They were having people set up reverse mortgages and let them sit there against the time when the homeowners needed a tax-free bucket to fund in-home care often. In-home care for some of our most unwell can run $30,000 depending on the needs. If you've got in-home dialysis or wound care, whatever the case may be, it's enormously expensive.
Is there a maintenance fee?
No maintenance fee, no monthly carrying cost, no.
So if you set up a reverse mortgage, there's no maintenance fee?
That's correct, no statement fee, no nothing. So, and actually, let me circle around, yes.
You may address this, but how much does this cost?
So what are the closing costs on it? The closing costs are federally regulated, federally set. There are 3 buckets, actually arguably 4. I haven't seen the last one. So there is some companies, some of the big telemarketers charge a statement fee. we don't. It is legal to charge a statement fee every month, but there are 3 fees that you have to pay. One, it's a federally insured mortgage, so you have to pay an origination fee. And the origination fee is capped at $6,000, and it's predicated upon the appraised value of the home. So the lowest origination fee you'll ever pay for, some kind of little double wide in South Carolina is gonna be $4,000. The most you're ever gonna pay is gonna be $6,000. Then there are gonna be title fees. Those are determined by the state and the county you live in.
So these
Some-
fees are paid at the time you sell?
No, they're paid, it's actually, technically, if you wanna think of it this way, it's the first draw on the line of credit. So the closing costs are the first draw on the line of credit. They're paid on your behalf, and they go to the state, the county, the feds. And then the third closing cost is the mortgage insurance premium, which is not insignificant. We're talking about big numbers here. If you live in an upper value home, like I have one right now in Great Falls, it's a $2.5 million property, and the mortgage insurance is gonna be $20,000 on it. Because they're not insuring just the mortgage itself, they're insuring the entire home, because they wanna make darn sure that if the home goes down in value, remember it's the home repaying this loan, if something awful, Russia were to hit us with a dirty bomb, and now everybody's home is functionally worthless, the line of credit for that couple is still gonna be there, and it's still gonna have that statutory growth, regardless of what happens to that home value. So when that couple passes away, and the home can't repay what's due on the loan, the mortgage insurance covers the shortfall. So the question was, what are the fees, the setup fees, or the origination fees? Origination fee, title fees, and the mortgage insurance premium. And so it's gonna cap out with an upper value home, like I did one, beginning of the year, $12.6 million property out in the Plains. And the closing costs on that were about $32,000 because the mortgage insurance was fully half that, a little bit more than half that. So, but do they pay that? No, they don't pay that. It's the first draw on the line of credit, and then everything else sitting there is their line of credit. It's picking up that growth. That growth does offset those closing costs, typically within 12 to 18 months, depending on the value of the home.
But you have a monthly draw for the insurance premium.
No, it's a one-time upfront fee. So the mortgage insurance is one of the closing costs. There's not a monthly ongoing insurance fee. And you don't pay anything. You don't pay anything in the month. Everything that's due on the loan, whatever you've drawn plus the interest on that, is repaid on the back end. And if you remember, just remember the name, it's a mortgage. It's a mortgage, not a miracle, it's not a mystery, just a mortgage. But it's a mortgage that's repaid on the back end in reverse mortgage. So I'm gonna leave it here, and then, yes?
Does the interest rate fluctuate?
It does. Any line of credit is always adjustable, despite what Navy Federal tells us.
Right.
A line of credit is an adjustable, it's called an open-end loan. Closed-end loan means you've taken the whole wad at closing, you can't go back for any more. Open-end is a line of credit. Yes, it floats with the U.S. Treasury bill. It's called the CMT, or Constant Maturity Treasury 5, CMT 5. So it's the index that it's indexed against is the T-bill. So I'm gonna set this aside, this umbrella aside for a second. So this was refinance. This is somebody who wants to age in place in their own home. But now let's say you're in this home. Your hips are bad, your husband's knees are bad, it's just not working, and you need to get into this home. You can do one of two things. You can take out a traditional mortgage, put down 20% and pay for the rest of your natural life. Or you can buy it all cash. And let's say you find the perfect home, single level living, and it's $700,000. And you've just sold this house. You've just sold this house, and you put $800,000 in the bank. After all was said and done, you put $800,000 in the bank. And you say, we'll just pay cash. $700,000 plus closing costs. What have you just done with $700,000? Yeah, you just turned all your liquidity into illiquidity. You don't have a mortgage payment, but you also don't have a big pot of money in the bank. And for most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, most of our wealth is in our homes. So you've just generated liquidity by selling this home, you put it in the bank, now you're gonna flip right back around and turn it into illiquidity. Or take out a mortgage and pay. And if one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse has all the debt, but half the income. So that's not great. So there's the third option, which is reverse for purchase. With reverse for purchase, the homeowners bring a down payment, the size of which is determined by their age. The loan amount makes up the rest, and you're done. You've made the only payment on that home you'll ever make. When the last person on title moves, sells, or dies, and moves for this definition means you've gone into a nursing home, moves, sells, or dies, the home is repaid, the home is sold, the loan is repaid, the kids or the heirs get the rest of the equity. So it's a way to get into an aging in place appropriate home without picking up a monthly mortgage payment. And the difference that makes, maybe at 65 or 75 making a monthly payment's no big deal, but by the time we're 85, most of us are picking up some significant pathologies, and we have dibs on our monthly income. Making that mortgage payment can be a backbreaker. Yeah?
How do the interest rates on this compare to a regular mortgage?
They're really neck and neck. So right now, our interest rate, because we attach it to, it's not some mystery index, it's just the UST bill. So right now, they're in the low sevens, like 7.2. It depends on the day I pull numbers. Like I said, it pings the treasury and pulls through the rates, but they're identical. The other thing, and this is kind of touching the third rail a little bit, but as we age, a lot of times the rate we can secure is not as competitive as it was when we were in our peak lending years. It has nothing to do with age specifically. It's a knock-on effect of aging, where our income a lot of times is fixed, and especially if we're flying solo, if we're trying to take out a loan in our own right, you're a bigger risk. So your interest rate is just a function, it's just a measurement of risk, right? So the older we get, if we have medical bills that are outstanding, or if we put stuff on credit cards to help finance a spouse's medical emergency, we're gonna get a worse rate as we're older. With reverse mortgage, the rate is not contingent upon your credit score. Yes.
This is for the lawyer.
Yes.
Is that money Medicaid exempt?
Well,
Well, so, you can answer that, but basically, this is one of the tools we use to try and avoid getting on Medicaid, is a part of long-term care planning is looking at, is it better to perhaps do a reverse mortgage? Because remember, that one house is exempt as long as you are living in it, or there's some exceptions, like a disabled child is living in it, et cetera. But if you can stay in your home, which is probably what most people tell me they wanna do, and you can pay for your care by using a reverse mortgage, I'm not gonna say it's the only option, but it is something that we talk about a lot. That's why Laurie speaks at a lot of our conferences, actually.
yes, so and a kind of a caveat to this, an add-on to this is the following. You can have community-based Medicaid in the home, Medicaid worker comes in the home, and have a reverse mortgage. Medicaid's not gonna cover everything you need, and they're certainly not gonna buy you new socks. Sarah talked about a toothbrush. Medicaid's not gonna buy you a new toothbrush. They're not gonna buy you new socks. They're not gonna put half and half in the fridge. You can have a reverse mortgage and Medicaid. Medicaid comes in and renders however many hours you've been allotted, and then you can draw on the reverse mortgage to cover the uncovered hours. You do have to be careful with how much money you take out and leave sitting in your bank account. And I've had many reverse mortgages bounce over to me midstream. They started off with one of the telemarketers, and then somebody said, well, you said that the telemarketer told you to take out $100,000 and put it in the bank. You can't do that. Medicaid sees that money in the bank, so you have to be careful to leave it in the pickle jar and take it out as you need it to meet your expenses. But yes, Medicaid, I do tons of Medicaid reverse mortgages. It is indeed compatible in most cases. And I wanted to actually add something else about Sarah. and I think we're probably all clear in this particular gathering, if you get into younger cohort, they're not clear on this, but an elder law attorney, and Sarah might take exception with my description here, the reason I plug elder law attorney so heavily, elder law attorney takes you from where you are today, takes care of you, and does your planning until the day you die, and then the estate plan takes you from the time you die, gets rid of your stuff, takes care of your kids. So somebody who's an elder law attorney and an estate planning attorney is the match made in heaven. They take care of you while you're here, they take care of your stuff when you're not here. And I myself, I was going through some pretty big health things. I went to an elder law attorney and it's like, get me set up in case there's an unexpected outcome from surgery. I want to know that, you know, if I have a sublethal event, throw a clot or whatever, and, you know, I'm not conscious, that all the stuff is set up so my girls have smooth sailing, take care of me when I die, take care of my stuff. So,
You don't die, take your final cruise.
final cruise, yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there a prepayment penalty
Oh.
at such time that the house is sold and?
There is not. So with any federally insured loan, with any FHA at least, there is never a prepayment penalty. The federal wording says no the loan can be repaid in part or in full at any time without penalty. The loan can be repaid in part or in full at any time without penalty. The other piece of the code I was getting ready to quote is if the house, so of course the thing we all fear as parents is that somehow we're gonna stick it to our kids with a big debt they can't satisfy. That would be called underwater. If you have a traditional loan and you owe $400,000 on it, so you borrowed $400,000 on a traditional line of credit, the market goes down, now your house is worth $200,000. Does the bank just say, well, dang, we're out $200,000? Well, no, they'll try to collect, they'll try to put a judgment against the estate, right? If you're underwater and you die, the lender's not just gonna throw up its hands and say, shoot. But with a reverse mortgage, if the home is underwater, we talked about this earlier when we talked about the mortgage insurance premium. If the home is underwater at the time the home is sold, the home will still repay what it can. The mortgage insurance pays off the rest. And the federal wording on that says no deficiency judgment shall be assessed against the homeowner, if they're living in a care facility, or the heirs, or the estate. No deficiency judgment shall be assessed against the homeowner, the heirs, or the estate. That holds true for reverse refinance as well as reverse for purchase. It's the exact same product, just different application. There's no point in keeping you in your own home with a line of credit if it's simply not the right home. So reverse for purchase is a way to get you into your aging in place home without picking up a mortgage payment and protecting you against downside market risk if the market heads down, and it protects your other assets.
Is that
Yeah.
what non-recourse means?
That's what non-recourse means, and reverse mortgage is actually the only true non-recourse loan that's typically available. There are other non-recourse loans, but if you want a 100% non-recourse loan that protects the homeowner, the heirs, and the estate, when people talk about reverse mortgage, that's one thing in my opinion, I feel is underemphasized. It is 100% non-recourse.
Laura, we just had someone pass away where the mom had a reverse mortgage on the house. Daughter went through a slightly different sale than usual at death, but it was very smooth, paid everything off. She ended up with some money at the end of the day.
Yep, that's the typical way it rolls. Yes, that is the typical way it rolls. I'm a big advocate, if you're not upper net worth, a transfer on death deed for people who just are, you know, of normal means. Are you all familiar with a transfer on death deed? We have two experts. A transfer on death deed is just a deed. It's put to record at the time you go to closing, or 3 days after closing. When the homeowner dies, the beneficiaries of the deed will present the death certificate and the home will automatically redeed in the name of the beneficiaries. I have a couple properties and I deeded all my properties and transfer my death deeds to make things easier for my kids. And of course, a trust does a very similar thing where
Well, who lives in the house then? Why would they repeat it?
I'm
The
dead.
beneficiary.
I'm dead. I dropped dead. So I died.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I
And
died
you left it to your children.
and I left my kids the home, exactly.
And
exactly.
they can benefit then from the reverse mortgage?
No,
They
no,
don't
so a
then?
reverse mortgage is
Okay.
primary occupancy only, it's
Okay.
for you
All right.
and not for your kids. If your kids are living there and you drop dead, the kids have to sell the home or refinance the debt into their own names and keep the home. This happens very frequently where somebody, the kids want to keep living in the home, they refinance that debt to their own name, or they sell the home.
And that's the case with any mortgage.
It's the case
If
with
you pass
any
away,
mortgage,
there's a mortgage on your house
exactly.
and your kids will have to refinance.
People are all up in arms, it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to refinance, it's like, yes, did you think you were gonna be able to live in that home for free?
Right.
It's like, no, that's already living there for free. They are already, yeah, and sometimes they're rendering care, you know, to be fair to the kids, and sometimes you get just deadbeat kids, and it's like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? Now, I wanna talk very briefly, the last thing I wanna talk about is what are the responsibilities of the homeowner? Taxes, 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 you gotta pay your property taxes. You gotta pay your property tax and your HOA fees. You gotta keep the home insured, and then routine maintenance. I have a little piece, I'm gonna walk you real quickly through the anatomy here. So some of these are reprints, until my little newspaper out in Warrenton was bought out, I had a little newspaper column that was called US of Aging, so if you see here, it says US of Aging, it's just indicating that it's a reprint of my newspaper column. But the second page here is called I Know a Lady. I Know a Lady. So right here, I know a lady. I have heard 1,000 times in my career, maybe a few thousand times, well, the reverse mortgage isn't so great. I know a lady. And it's like, wait, I can finish your sentence. I know a lady, she had a reverse mortgage and she lost her home. I know something about that lady. The person talking to me didn't know about that lady, and I know that lady didn't pay her property taxes. And the tax man came a knocking. You gotta pay your taxes. You gotta pay your taxes. You can lose your home to the tax man even if you have no mortgage at all, right? Paying your taxes is not a function of a mortgage, it's a function of home ownership. You gotta pay your taxes. The
So
reason
you guys don't set up an escrow account?
only if you've run into trouble. If you've had a real spotty payment history of taxes in the past, at the time of origination, we do have to escrow for taxes, but not for 6 months. We have to escrow for the entire rest of your life. So it's a big fix, but it does work well. I was a super vocal, loudmouth opponent to this when they first rolled this out. It's like, this is gonna be terrible. I was dead wrong. FHA was right, I was dead wrong. So the escrows for the people who have had trouble in the past paying their taxes has worked like a charm. Keep people from losing their house in the future, tax deficiency. So pay your taxes, keep your home insured. HOA dues is a biggie, we think they're optional. Oh no, oh no. They can do a for sale HOA if you're deficient on your condo dues or your HOAs. They can actually start the foreclosure process. Did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and just wrap it up here and open it up to questions. I know we've been flying low and fast here, but does anybody have any additional questions? I do have, if you go to Laurie MacNaughton YouTube, I've got a whole bunch of little 2-minute long cartoons. These are not profound. But it does walk you through refinance, purchase. It walks you through if you've got a neighbor who does have bad credit. I've got one up there that's called reverse mortgage, what if I have bad credit? In-home care. Anyway, just topics I run into again and again. I've made little cartoon videos and put them on YouTube. So.
Does your credit rating affect the rate?
It does not.
It
It
does
does not. It's your age and interest rate. It is not, it does not ride upon interest rates. Upon credit scores. Good question. So, well, I'm so happy you all were able to come out. I just want to thank our hosts here. Absolutely marvelous.
I have to say, Fran had to leave, she has, I think, what is it?
Granddaughters in a performance,
Her
yeah.
granddaughters in a performance. But what we wanted to say, when we had the special privilege of meeting Laurie, it was because Fran and I were in a training class. And we always had that same kind of, that negative connotation about reverse mortgages until, as Cindy had mentioned earlier, the instructor who's been in real estate since real estate's been real estate, mentioned to us and to the class, if you have clients that are in a position that they think they're gonna leave, move soon, the house doesn't fit them anymore, which is what we're frequently finding. And what we're finding is we're coming in at the very tail end when people should have been talking to Laurie, to Sarah, to us long in advance to help them. I mean, it's meant to help people because when it hits you, and it's hit me and my family, it's like a ton of bricks coming down on you. You have so much to take care of and so much to think about. And we didn't have experts like you and Sarah and my family to get back upon, and it matters. It makes a huge difference. So our intent was, how can we help our clients, and anybody you know that you think could benefit from this, please share the word. Because we're interested in doing this again in the future and having Laurie and Sarah join us and a few other people like Janet to help people. It's meant to kind of get, if you haven't thought about it, think about it. If you have thought about it, maybe you're gonna learn something you didn't know. And I think we have learned things today that we didn't know. So thank you, Laurie and Sarah, we really appreciate it.
Can the person with the durable power of attorney access the reverse mortgage?
Great question, yes, yes. So if we've set it up, if we've set up the reverse mortgage using the power of attorney, it's very straightforward, they just make the draws, because that's presupposing, I mean, we have to prove that the homeowner is incapacitated. So they've had a stroke or they've got, So, but if somebody slips into incapacity afterward, and now they can't on their own right draw from their line of credit, is what happens is we send in a doctor's letter saying Mrs. Smith is now incapacitated, and then we send in the power of attorney, and the loan then is accessible by the agent on the power of attorney.
As long as it's drafted right.
As long as it's
Yeah.
drafted, yeah, in a compliant fashion, yes, exactly. So we have to do a trust review, we have to do that too, but a power of attorney review to make sure that it has indeed been drafted.
Because we have two set up. We have a financial power of attorney and a medical power of attorney. And they're two different individuals.
Right, right. The medical power of attorney is not something we would ever need to see, but the financial power of attorney is, along with the doctor's letter.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you, Laurie and Sarah, again. And if you do have any future questions, you do have their contact information, so feel free to reach out to them. And thank you for coming on this wonderful Saturday.
Thank you.